very much. And so that's what I want to talk about next, are the messages that we've gotten in our culture around sex. So first, let's talk about sex positive. So what are the messages that you've gotten that talk about sex as something to celebrate? What are those messages?
Love. It's a way to show tenderness.
Okay.
Your affection for your partner.
Shows affection.
It feels good.
Relaxed.
Relaxes.
Releases endorphins.
It's a way to like
Releases endorphins.
kind of get to know each other more, like your partner kind of just like makes your bond deeper.
Way to get to know partner and bond. Okay.
Respect.
Pardon me?
Respect for each other.
That sex is a way to show respect to each other?
You understand that person better. You trust. I don't. Kind of trying to figure out what I'm trying to
well, let's switch over and talk about some of the negative messages. Sex negative. Those ideas that maybe sex can be scary.
Diseases.
That's too.
Disease.
Have too much sex and you're a slut.
Slut.
You could get pregnant, but you don't want to.
Pregnant.
That's also a positive.
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Unwanted pregnancy. Yeah.
So we have wanted pregnancies and we have unwanted pregnancies. What else? What have you heard about sex?
Nervous.
Nervous?
Yeah, being nervous. You want to be able to satisfy that person.
Oh, yeah.
That it's like
There's stress to satisfy.
Yep.
that it's like always supposed to be like scary your first time and terrible your first time.
Scary and terrible. Okay. Anything? Yep.
No.
Yeah, because, and why do we make such a point about consent?
Otherwise, it's real.
Because what we masculine sexuality is coercive, right?
Kind of, I guess it's not a specific sex negative, but like if females dress certain ways or act certain ways that they're like asking for it. Being too
Yeah, so we have to worry about how we dress, how we walk.
Which I'm surprised it doesn't happen to guys instead. I mean, I know it's not a huge thing with guys being raped, but I'm surprised, oh, he dressed that way, so, he asked for that woman to take.
Like the ones who have their pants down under their
Right.
butts.
Now that is
Yeah.
cute.
That's a negative.
And men are raped and sexually abused too,
Just
absolutely.
it's not as publicized.
Yeah, so we always need to be cautious, we need to protect ourselves, sex is dangerous. Female sexuality, how's female sexuality? Well, that's the slut thing, right? Predatory. We have to define all these very narrow limits around sex. Anybody raised that, as I said, told that sex is a sin? Yeah? Especially if you're not married. Yeah. What about anybody raised that homosexuality is a problem? Yeah. And a lot of those messages are still out there. So a little bit easier to come up with sex negative than sex positive. The way we tend to talk about sex in our society. And it really is confusing. We get these mixed messages. One minute, our society is trying to exploit sex and demean it. Use it as a marketing campaign. You ever notice that?
Oh, yeah.
Turn it into a sport. Pardon me?
I said Burger King, the commercial of her eating the hamburger.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Well, in every beer commercial ever made, right? I mean, and on the other hand, the next minute, society is trying to repress sex and vilify it and blame it. So how do we make our way, how do we navigate in these conflicting messages? Navigating our sex life can be really difficult. And in the process, we could entrust ourselves to somebody who's not careful with our bodies or our spirits. A bad sexual experience is far too prevalent and far too damaging and very difficult to recover from. So I advocate that one of the first things we do is replace the marriage ethic with the sexual ethic. Now the marriage ethic is what I was talking about before, how I was raised. If you're married, sex is okay. If you're not, sex is bad. There's a couple of problems with that. One is that it has nothing to say to single young people who aren't married. How many of you are not married? Yeah. It has nothing to say to gay and lesbian people who still aren't allowed to get married in much of our country. It has nothing to say to widowed or divorced people. It has nothing to say to single disabled people, single elderly. It really has nothing to say to anybody who's not married. And at the same time, it implicitly condones a whole host of abusive and demeaning behavior as long as it takes place within a legally recognized union. So marriage itself is based on an ownership model. It's an old model. Essentially, men use men use money to secure sex, and women use sex to gain financial stability and raise their children. But in that kind of model, two people feel like they own each other and have the right to control each other's behavior. So whose behavior can we control? Our own. That's the only one we can control. And if we want to start relating to each other as something other than property, then we need to find a different way to relate to each other. The marriage ethic proposes that marriage is the reason to have sex, and that sex is all about lifelong bonding. So instead of that, we need to look at creating a sexual ethic. When I was growing up, when I was your age, and I heard the word slut, this was decades ago, obviously, but the risk that I always ran into, and my fellow women, was falling into the category of either being called a slut or being called a prude. I don't think those categories are quite as relevant as they used to be. I think right now the greater risk is the trivialization of sex. We're just simply inundated with so much sexual material from such an early age. And we're not given the tools to deal with that. Is anybody, who knows what the average age of exposure to internet pornography is now? 13? 13, no?
Like 10.
Probably.
Yeah, it's 11 moving down to 10.
Wow.
10 years old, and that's the average. Long before kids get into high school, fifth graders are firing up their smartphones and their tablets and their computers and watching any number of sexual acts.
Is that why sixth graders are getting pregnant now?
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't-
Absolutely.
You don't even have to limit that to internet porn.
No,
Mhm.
no,
Broadcast television has gone way down.
it's true. It's true. Everything is there. And what's happening is our young people are getting distorted messages about what sex is, what real people enjoy, what real people look like. And they're not being given tools to deal with their own blossoming sexuality. They're being taught to exploit other people. So, how do you know if sex is healthy and holy or self-indulgent and exploitive? That's where the sexual ethic comes in. A sexual ethic is about being intentional and discerning about how we will be sexual beings in the world. And these are the elements of my sexual ethic. So I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to invite you to write your own. The first is that you have to have a level of maturity. Rather than setting an arbitrary age of consent, you have to know who you are, and you have to like yourself. Because you're not going to find yourself in sex, and you're not going to get affirmation for who you are from anybody else in sex. I told my 19-year-old son, about the prude slut thing, and his response to me was, gee, Mom, I don't know a single girl who's not a slut. Now, I don't believe that, and I'm not even sure he believes that, but I do know that there's a lot of young women who think that that is the image they need to portray because of all of the role models that they're seeing. So maturity is about being ourselves, not pretending to be something else, and being comfortable in our own skin. There needs to be equal power and vulnerability. We will be attracted to people who have more or less power than we have, but we always have a choice whether to act on that. And if we do get in a relationship with somebody in a role of power over us, we run a much greater risk that we will end up being taken advantage of. Or if we're in a relationship with someone over whom we have power, we run taking advantage of them, even if that's not our intention initially. It just really complicates things when somebody has power over grades or job raises or even attention from somebody in a place of respect and authority. The third thing is there has to be mutual consent. And you heard a lot about that yesterday. Yes means yes, no means no, and maybe means maybe. No won't be punished with withdrawal or coercive tactics, and maybe means waiting for yes. Yes, very clear yes from both parties, means that the fun can begin. I want to make a special point about this because a lot of people buy into mutual consent until they get married, and then they start thinking they don't have a choice anymore. You always have a choice. Your body is always your own. You always have personal agency. Once, if you've had sex with somebody once, that doesn't mean you ever have to say yes again. In a marriage relationship, both people still need to give mutual consent. And if the consent isn't given, then there's no sex and there's no reprimand, repercussions. We continue to honor each other. Responsibility. You need to take responsibility for protecting yourself and your partner from sexually transmitted disease and unplanned pregnancy. And I have a commercial I want to share.
Good men know how to love and at the same time. Good men aren't deterred by feeling or by the sweet, sweet smell of things that smell good. Good men aren't frightened by a healthy lifestyle filled with antioxidants, organic vegetables, and biodegradable low-carbon footprint recycled materials. Good men aren't takers, they're givers. To keep giving and giving, they need to have the right tools. Not these tools, or these tools. These tools. Good men aren't intimidated by cleanliness or thoughtfulness. They would never put harmful additives inside a woman's body. Good men know sex isn't about conquering women. It's about always making it worth her while. Good men give a so you should too.
Isn't that great? I found that it was, Al Condom is a company owned by Talia Franklin. She is a photojournalist who was covering the AIDS epidemic in Africa and came back and started this condom company. And for every condom that she sells, she donates one to a third country. So just a very, very cool program. The next element is relational intimacy. If you're going to have sex with somebody, you need to know it's somebody you can trust. You need to know them at least enough to have this conversation. If you can't have this conversation, that's pretty scary. When I talk about sex and I talk about there being emotional consequences, you should make sure you're both on the same page. That you have the same expectations of what this encounter means and what your relationship is. If you're willing to make a commitment, then you need to honor and be true to that commitment. If things change over time so that you're not willing to make that commitment anymore, you need to talk about that openly and honestly. I had a friend I was working with, he was a therapist. I worked at a methadone clinic for a while, and he was looking forward to the weekend because his wife and he had separated, and they've not had sex for a couple of years. So he was looking forward to going to the bar and having sex. And after the weekend, he came in and I asked him, Monday night, how things had gone. And he said he had decided not to. And this is what he told me. I love the way he put this. He said he realized he was sitting in the bar that when two people lay down together, one of them is bound to come up with feelings. And the one with feelings might be you or it might not be you. And either way, it's not comfortable. I just thought that was a wonderful way to put that. And other enriching and self-liberating. So sex is a gift we give and a gift we receive. So we should be interested in pleasing our partner, and we should also have a healthy amount of self-interest. And finally, sex is meant to be joyful, without feelings of guilt and remorse. So if you're going to do something that you're going to feel awful about later, that's a good reason not to do it. What I'd like you to do now is you all have an index card. And if you don't have pens, I have pens. And I want you to start writing down your sexual ethic. I want you to take 2 minutes. And you can certainly model mine, but you're not going to do anything because I do it. You need to think about what your sexual ethic is. How you will make decisions about being a sexual being in the world. Anybody need a pen? Or a card? Kayla's coming with cards. There she is. Oops. You got a pen? One person, and share with each other the most important thing on your card. The most important thing on your card regarding your sexual ethic.
Sexual respect. Just general respect.
I get where you're coming from with the respect. I don't know how to like to me, respect that you can talk to the other person about it, and they would say, oh well, I'm interested in trying this, and the other person would be like, I'm not so much, and so then the first person would be like, all right, I respect that, and then like maybe coming up with a different idea. So like respect each other and what each other wants or doesn't want, and how you said like even after you're married or in a relationship, you can always say no. So if your partner says no, then respecting them enough to maybe snuggle that night, but not do anything sexually because they don't want to. So that's where I guess how I understand respect that
You just want to just in general respect that person for who they are. You don't want to just say, hey, let's do it. Just do it.
Well, respect is about honoring that person for who they are, not needing to change them into anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being who you are, being authentically who you are.
Well,
For yourself as well as the other.
in 16 years of marriage, one thing that I have learned is that sex helps satisfy, but love endures, whether there is continued sex or not. And love is so much more than sex. Because at some point, sex goes away, but you have to love that person and you have to like them. And then you discover, really, that's why you have people who have lost their limbs, who still have a wife who loves them. I know before I married my husband, I told my mother-in-law, if he got paralyzed from the neck down, I would still love him. And he still gives me goosebumps.
That's awesome.
The opposite gender, right?
Don't wrong. And there's no
Right?
That's my 7 medal.
Don't give it to Amy. Before 45.
All right, thank you.
Killing me, not being.
Thank you for sharing. And as I said, continue to work on that. Basically, a sexual ethic says that I won't meet my needs at the expense of somebody else. So as we talked about, sex can be really, really good. But it takes intentionality and discernment in making those sexual decisions. Sexual energy is the most powerful stimulus of all. A rich treasure of joy and happiness and passion. But it remains a virtue only to the extent that we exercise it with wisdom and compassion and understanding. Ultimately, sex asks something of us, that we live our lives more fully and that we manifest ourselves more transparently. So what I want to do finally is ask you to leave here with 3 things to do, including working on your ethic. 1 is to love your body. 2nd is to relish sex. And 3rd is to marvel in this very good gift. Namaste. Do you have any questions, or what are your questions? And we have a couple of minutes. You can get it autographed. Absolutely.
Can we buy books?
Yeah. Can they buy books? Is there a rule against that?
Do you have books?
I do
Because
have
that's
books.
really not.
Yeah, I mean, if
Promoting.
I have books.
if you're